I grew up in a small town in the Ottawa Valley, and it's fair to say that I liked to collect things. Comics, action figures, hockey cards, anything that had to do with either Star Wars or Planet of the Apes. Most of my friends had something they collected as well. Matchbox cars, Lego, coins. Typical kid stuff, right? It just seemed to me that this was something kids did. A privilege of childhood. You gathered and hoarded as much as you could of the stuff you loved the most. It didn't occur to me that this was something adults could do as well. I mean, now, sure. But back then? I don't know how my mom first saw or found out about the Franklin Mint series of Gone with the Wind dolls, but once she did, she had to have them. 4 came in the series, and they weren't all available at once. You had to order one at a time, and wait for the next one, and the next, and the next. There were 4 in all: Rhett, Scarlett, Ashley, and Melanie, and although I had never seen the movie at that point, I knew of it. I had seen images from it often enough in movie entertainment clip shows like That's Entertainment. These always seemed to be on TV, and there was a well-worn copy of the book on a bookshelf in our home. I knew of it. And although I had no memory of my mother ever watching the film, at least not with me, she needed those dolls. And they were breathtaking. Perfect faces, incredibly detailed clothing, impressive size. They were magnificent. And although I never thought of my mother as a collector of memorabilia, as the sort of member of a fandom that would essentially require she have such things, she had a pride and ownership of them, the type that any fan of such a thing would be lucky to express. Forever displayed prominently in her home, which now, decades later, I see as a sort of tribute to her vast collections of glass figurines, vintage dolls, china, crystal, antiques, and most valuably, family photographs. Sure, she collects. She always had. I just couldn't see it then. Brett and his friends look as good now as they did the day they first came out of the box, with their certificates of authenticity and their series numbers. And they looked as good then as they did on the screen 40 years earlier, an incredible connection to a past time when fandom didn't require the t-shirt, and the tattoo, and the merchandise, and the conventions, and the endless debates on the internet. It was just a time when you could love old movies. Hello, film historians. I'm Derek, and I love old movies. We've got Sam the sidekick here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 14, our first stop in an all-war movie month of November.
Yes, this is going to be a lot of fun. You are, of course, a big fan of war movies.
Oh, yes. As are you.
Again, yes.
And we have some great ones coming up.
Oh, we do.
And even some special guests.
Also, that will be happening. November is a big month.
I don't want to wait. Let's get going.
For sure. But let's take a moment to give a shout out to our listeners. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your messages and interactions on the socials. It's really cool to be in touch with you, and cooler still to share what we do with you.
Definitely stay in touch. Keep sending us your ideas for future episodes, so when we do our all-request month of January, we will have great films from which we can choose.
And that will be here before you know it. And while you are waiting for that, maybe doing a guest spot on the show is something you would like to consider doing. If that's the case, please let us know.
Each episode starts with a cold open where
anyone, really,
talks about their love of film or personal experiences they have with movies that are memorable and nostalgic. And if you wanted, this could be you.
So, if being a special guest on a podcast like this is on your list of goals, definitely give us a shout and let's make it happen.
Yup.
Let's tell them how, Sam.
You can find us on the Facebook.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
Or maybe the Instagram is more your thing.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
It is possible to find us on the Twitter, too.
At ILOM Podcast.
Or send us a good old-fashioned email. We love those.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast, at gmail.com.
All one word.
Now, just before we get to the film, I want to talk a bit about an article that was sent to me by a friend of the show, Adam Martinetti.
All remember that guy.
Yeah, who could forget him? Anyway, the article is from IndieWire, and it's called What's the Future of Classic Film Appreciation? It's a very interesting article that talks about the role of classic pre-1960 films in terms of their roles socially, educationally, as part of the canon of cinema, and through the lens of accessibility and visibility through streaming services. Also, this is looked at through the eyes of modern audiences that are quick to condemn how certain topics were presented in the past. Obviously, film history is sort of the thing we do here, and this article was of great interest. I'm not going to blow by blow it, but if it's the sort of thing you think you might be interested in reading about, I will post the link in our episode description, and thanks to Adam for sending it our way.
I have to say, I feel like some of the big streaming services could do a better job of having classic film catalogs, and studios should really make these accessible. It's not easy to find the classics on Netflix or Prime, and while Tubi has a good selection of old films, I wouldn't say that there are a lot of true classics there.
That's all true. And the article goes into this a bit, and keeps coming back to the Turner Classic Movie Channel. It's really the top TV station in North America for that sort of thing, and nothing else comes close.
And why don't we have that again?
Because our cable provider doesn't carry it.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So, Run Silent, Run Deep, eh? A submarine movie?
Totally. Are you ready to do a deep dive on this one?
And there it is.
Our director is Robert Wise. In 1933, his family was struggling financially because of the Great Depression, so instead of going back to college, he moved to Hollywood. His older brother had started working at RKO Pictures a few years earlier, so he was able to get Wise employment working small jobs at RKO before he moved on to editing. His first screen credit was for a 10-minute short called A Trip Through Fiji Land in 1935, and Wise continued to do editing work for several years and worked on his first solo film in 1939 called Bachelor Mother. Wise collaborated with Orson Welles on Citizen Kane and received the Academy Award for film editing. Wise even used techniques he learned from working on the production in his future films. Wise got his first directing job in 1944, working with Hollywood horror producer Val Lewton on The Curse of the Cat People. He went on to direct a personal favorite of his, The Body Snatcher, in 1945, starring Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. By the late 1950s, he had directed many successful films across several genres, including the science fiction film The Day the Earth Stood Still, the melodrama So Big, the western Tribute to a Bad Man, starring James Cagney, and he directed West Side Story, which won and was nominated for multiple awards. He also directed The Sound of Music, which won awards for Best Director and Best Picture. In the late 1960s and through the 70s, Wise directed films such as The Sand Pebbles, The Hindenburg, and Star Trek the Motion Picture. He was generally successful in many different genres, including horror, westerns, war, drama, and sci-fi. Wise was the president of the Directors Guild of America from 1971 to 75 and was the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences from 1985 to 1988. Wise also received the American Film Institute Life Achievement Award in 1998. He died in 2005 at the age of 91.
The writer is John Gay. He began his career writing episodes for television anthology series and made his screenwriting debut in 1956 with Run Silent, Run Deep. For television, Gay adapted many literary classics, such as The Red Badge of Courage, 1974, and he also wrote several television biopics, and even small screen remakes of films such as Dial M for Murder, 1981. Gay also wrote the one-man play performed by Vincent Price called Diversions and Delights, which premiered in 1977. He is best known for his work on Separate Tables, 1958, Around the World in 80 Days, 1989, and Lux Video Theater, 1950. He died in 2017 at the age of 92.
When talking about the big stars of the golden age of Hollywood, it can only be said that they came no bigger than Clark Gable, a man whose fame and success earned him the nickname The King.
Wow. So was he like the Elvis of Hollywood?
That is a better comparison than you know. Certainly, during the 1930s, Clark Gable was Mr. Hollywood. Now, a quick caveat, as with some of our bigger stars that we discuss, there is really no possible way to respectfully and accurately summarize their careers without leaving out many important details. But we'll try to stick to the interesting stuff, and Gable has much of interest to discuss.
Let's hear it.
So, after honing his craft on stage and in a few bit parts in silent films during the 1920s, Gable came to Hollywood at exactly the time when MGM was looking to expand its roster of top male stars. With his magnetic appeal, incredible good looks, and unrelenting masculinity, Gable checked all the boxes. And once Joan Crawford requested him as her co-star in Dance Fools Dance, he became quite in demand and was paired with all of the studio's big female stars, including Crawford 6 more times. But it was in It Happened One Night, the original screwball romantic comedy, where his role as a Hollywood legend hit home, with the film being a huge hit and winning 5 Oscars, including Best Actor and Best Picture. Until he entered the Air Force in 1942, Gable would always be at or near the top of box office draws. 2 more films he starred in would go on to win Best Picture before then, though: Mutiny on the Bounty and Gone with the Wind. After his time in the war, despite still being a huge star, his films weren't attaining the same kind of success, despite him working frequently with top directors and top stars. By 1955, he had left MGM, and the quality of his films continued to deteriorate.
And this isn't even getting into his time in the Air Force, or his legendary romance with Carole Lombard.
I know. There's literally too much to cover with him. Different sections of his life and career alone would make solo episodes for us. In 1958, Gable went to Paramount, making Teacher's Pet with Doris Day, and Run Silent, Run Deep, and the award-nominated It Started in Naples with Sophia Loren. But it was his last film that might have been his finest. Of course, I'm talking about The Misfits.
We've got that on DVR, right? You've told me about that one.
We do, and I did. Tragically, the last film of both Gable and Marilyn Monroe, The Misfits shows a tantalizing look at the potential that both performers still had to offer so deep into their careers. These weren't the stars that everyone knew from their previous work. This was something more, something better, and the film arguably shows both of them at their best. Certainly, Gable considered it the best work of his career. One of the greatest stars of old Hollywood, Clark Gable passed away in 1960 at the age of 59.
Normally, the actor we would discuss here is Burt Lancaster, the co-star of this film. But we already talked about him way back in episode 1, Rope of Sand.
You can go back and listen to that. We'll wait.
But instead, this time I thought I would throw some attention to Brad Dexter, who plays Ensign Cartwright. A former amateur boxer and Air Force serviceman in World War II, Brad Dexter's first stage name was Barry Mitchell. He had appearances in film, radio, and theater under that name until 1950, when he appeared in The Asphalt Jungle, directed by John Huston. It was then that he became known as Brad Dexter, and spent the bulk of his career in small or supporting parts, usually in a tough guy role. He became far more active as a TV actor in guest spots than in film as his career went on, but the crown jewel of his acting resume has to be his appearance in the 1960 classic The Magnificent Seven, where he played Harry Luck.
Also known as the least magnificent of the 7.
Yeah, he knew it too. As Dexter said, "I'm the one from the Magnificent Seven nobody remembers."
You were saying there were 2 other interesting things about him.
Yes. One is that aside from Magnificent Seven, he made a few other films with Yul Brynner, appearing in Invitation to a Gunfighter and Terrace Bulba.
That seems so random.
The other thing is he literally saved Frank Sinatra's life.
What? How?
So, during the filming of None But the Brave, Sinatra went for a swim in the ocean and got sucked out to sea by the waves. He was drowning and in fact lost consciousness. But Brad Dexter swam out there and kept him above water until surfers could get on the scene and help aid in the rescue. He actually won a medal for bravery for that, and he and Sinatra stayed close enough that a few years later, when Frank was wondering if he should marry Mia Farrow, it was Dexter that counseled him not to, and that led to Sinatra ending the relationship.
It sounds like Frank thought he was pretty magnificent.
Right?
Based on the 1955 novel by Commander Edward Beach, Run Silent, Run Deep was made into a film in 1958, largely financed by Burt Lancaster's own production company and distributed through United Artists. The film was billed as Moby Dick meets Mutiny on the Bounty and was intended to explore themes of vengeance, honor, loyalty, and courage during wartime. Now, Beach was never satisfied with the finished film, convinced that his book's rights were purchased solely for the use of the name and not to accurately retell the story of the novel. The themes definitely resonated with director Robert Wise, though, as a central plot point of the film. The idea of the older desk-bound commander taking a ship from a younger officer ready to assume his first command would be completely revisited and refined in Star Trek the Motion Picture over 20 years later.
Was the film well thought of at the time?
Critics generally liked it, but it wasn't a huge draw at the box office, with audiences more interested in Clark Gable's film with Doris Day, which was released at the same time. Still, history has been kind to the film, as it has made several of the AFI Top 400 lists over the years, and was nominated for the AFI list of Top 100 Most Heart-Pounding Films of all time.
It's a top 20, for sure.
Yeah. The film wasn't without its production problems, though, with Gable and Lancaster not getting along, and Gable especially touchy about the idea of his character being replaced in command by Lancaster's, as he felt it went against his carefully crafted MGM image over the past 20 years. The Clark Gable brand didn't get supplanted in a film, he argued, and he was so upset about this part of the plot that he actually left the production for a few days. Eventually, the decision was made to alter the script to have Gable's character receive a serious injury while acting heroically, and the injury would necessitate the transfer of command.
Wow. That's pretty serious Hulk Hogan prima donna stuff right there. But he and Lancaster got along on set otherwise, right?
No, not so much. For one, Gable, although only in his late 50s, really thought of himself as an older actor, and as such wanted production to stop at 5 p.m. every day. So he left at 5 p.m. every day, and this caused a fair amount of tension with one of the producers, who was also the principal funder of the film.
Who's that?
Burt Lancaster.
Yikes.
Yeah, and this led to a lot of teasing going on about Gable's age, with this teasing being led by Lancaster. Things got tense enough between them that on breaks, while filming aboard the USS Firefly, Lancaster would sit alone in the officer's mess, while Gable would hang out with the enlisted crewmen.
Being a regular guy.
Who is also the king of Hollywood.
And a war hero.
And suffering from the ravages of alcohol and tobacco abuse.
So Burt Lancaster wasn't really the great guy we've heard about when it came to this film. Because by all accounts, he was a pretty decent fellow.
Yeah, I guess not. He even got into it with Robert Wise. After Wise submitted his final cut, Lancaster recut the film to his own vision, leaving Wise feeling alienated and basically divorcing himself from the project going forward. And that's a shame, because Wise did so much to make this film great, including insisting that his actors be trained by actual submariners, so that their actions, reactions, and behaviors aboard the ship in the film, especially during the combat scenes, would look as genuine as possible.
Wow. Wow. So where does this film fit in the Burt Lancaster Paradox scheme of things?
Okay. So, as we discussed in episode 1, the Burt Lancaster Paradox is when an actor whose work you don't like, in my case, Burt Lancaster, seems to always turn up in just fantastic films. And yeah, I feel like Run Silent, Run Deep is going to be one of those.
Fair.
All right, Sam, what's the tail of the tape on this one?
So we have a 7.3 on IMDb. The audience score is 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the tomato meter is 100%. The film won no awards, and it can be watched on YouTube.
We open on a map, and we are looking at the Bungo Strait near the coast of Japan in 1942.
And in open water, Commander Richardson's sub is spotted by Japanese ships. They're preparing to attack.
No wasted time here.
I feel claustrophobic already. All the shots are so tight. Ugh.
They are attacked by depth charges and their sub is destroyed. It wasn't much of a fight.
All that is preamble. Now we get a proper credit sequence. Oh, Don Rickles is in this. Can we watch Kelly's Heroes again? It was such a blast.
You love war movies.
I do.
Now we're at Pearl Harbor, 1 year later. Richardson is desk-bound. He keeps replaying the battle where he lost his ship on his desk. He's having trouble dealing with how he lost that fight, and 4 subs have been sunk in that strait since.
Burt Lancaster, Bledsoe, is currently running a sub, the USS Nurka, that is docked for shore leave. The crew love him and want him to assume command since their captain is wounded and can't continue. But Commander Richardson is going to take command of the sub, and Bledsoe doesn't like that.
Lieutenant Bledsoe goes to confront Richardson. He doesn't want to be the executive officer under him. He feels the crew is more behind him, and it will be awkward.
That seemed a bit self-serving. Oh, I want to be the captain, but you're going to be, so I quit. And also, everyone likes me more.
You summed that up very nicely.
Also, I can't believe how big submarines are. On the outside, I mean. On the inside, they're still a nope.
As the ship heads out, they get their orders. They are to avoid the Bungo Straits.
Richardson's methods seem to put the crew ill at ease. It's definitely not how they're used to doing things. They drill, drill, drill. Richardson has a clear vision of what he wants them to be able to do.
Soon, there's a late-night encounter with a Japanese sub, and Richardson opts not to engage.
This doesn't sit well with the crew, especially Bledsoe, who tells him friendly advice about the ship. She hates showing her backside to Japanese submarines.
The officers and the crew aren't quite sure what to make of this. Is this just a drill cruise? So Bledsoe confronts Richardson and asks, "Are we drill cowards?" He flat out says he thinks they ran from the sub out of cowardice.
The movie is doing a great job of building all these little moments between characters that we really don't know much about. But it all works because the situation is so intense.
And soon, they encounter a Japanese destroyer and a tanker. They go for the attack. The crew works as a well-oiled machine.
All that drilling.
They torpedo the tanker and are spotted by the destroyer and maneuver for a head-on attack.
This is why they did the drills.
And they land a kill shot on the bow of the destroyer. Not exactly a move out of the playbook, but so effective.
The crew is now energized and fully behind Richardson.
But some officers are wondering why he drilled them for a bow shot. It's not standard. And are they heading to the Bungo Straits?
Later, they encounter a 6-ship convoy.
Richardson freezes up for a moment and seems to avoid the fight. Bledsoe deduces that they are going to the Bungo. They have an argument about the captain's prerogative in interpreting orders.
The orders that specifically said, don't go into the Bungo Strait.
And Bledsoe predicts Richardson's demotion, saying, "There won't be a desk small enough for you." But Richardson fires back, saying he has a responsibility to a dead crew and to a dead sub.
When word gets out of Richardson's intentions, the crew realizes that they might be in some real trouble. At a secret officers meeting, they want Bledsoe to take command. He doesn't like this mutinous talk, however.
Their target is the Japanese destroyer, the Akakazi, the ship that never misses. And even Richardson has doubts. He admires Bledsoe a great deal and wonders if he is doing the right thing going into the Bungo Straits.
They find another convoy and the Akakazi is there. Their plan is to lure it in like they did the destroyer and bow shoot it. But the convoy has air support.
Richardson presses the attack regardless.
Sort of a Moby Dick thing going on here.
Yeah, I'd say. There's absolutely a hellacious battle. The Zeros drop bombs, the Akakazi fire shells and depth charges, and a rogue torpedo, presumably from their own ship, almost takes the Nurka out.
The submarine suffers damage and casualties. 3 crewmen are dead, and Richardson receives a serious head injury.
Taking command, Bledsoe sends up debris, oil, blankets, and 3 dead crewmen to make it look like they were destroyed. The Japanese see this and assume the sub has been sunk.
That was rough.
The tension was amazing in that scene.
Repairs get underway. Richardson has a concussion and will have blackouts. This isn't good.
And Richardson wants to go on the attack again, but Bledsoe tells him the crew won't support it. And since Richardson didn't obey orders, he can be relieved. Bledsoe tells the officers that he will be in command and they will head back to Pearl Harbor.
Richardson gets a solid dig in with, "The first command you give as a captain is to retreat."
A Japanese radio broadcast brags of the sinking of the Nurka and named the officers and crewmen by name. But how could they know this?
How? The garbage wasn't sunk properly. Way to go, nameless crewman.
You had one job, buddy. Jeez.
Given this new knowledge, and the advantage of the Japanese thinking them destroyed, Bledsoe decides to return to Bungo and attack secretly. Richardson is still bedridden and wishes him luck.
They find another convoy with the Akakazi in it. Bledsoe commands really well. They sink one ship and go head on with the Akakazi.
And they sink it, using Richardson's tricky bow shot maneuver.
But then, this mystery signal is picked up. Richardson is back up and he realizes that it was never the Yakakaze that was the problem, but a Japanese submarine. The rogue torpedo from before wasn't rogue. It was Japanese.
So, as if things weren't tense enough, we get a sub-battle, complete with silent running.
Bledsoe and the crew lure it to the surface and kill it with an awesome trick shot underneath the hull of a ship it was using for cover. Richardson gave the order to fire.
They escape attacking Zeros and get away safely, but Richardson succumbs to his wounds and is buried at sea.
The end.
My goodness. That was like having a 90-minute panic attack.
Yeah.
My heart.
Let's pro and con this.
Absolutely.
My pros. The tension. This movie oozes tension. Whether it is between characters, or amongst the crew, or just the stress of battle, or depth charges exploding all around a submerged and very vulnerable submarine, this film does a wonderful job of keeping the tension consistently high and never really lets up. The pacing is incredibly fast, and this is a very brisk film, but that means the viewer is taken from tense moment to tense moment to tense moment. I had to let out a huge, relieved exhale when this film was over. For a film not directed by Alfred Hitchcock, the tension is a noticeable strength, and this was so ably supported not only by the plot and the story beats, but also by the claustrophobic filming style that Robert Wise employs. Every shot on the ship is a medium to close shot, and the lens frame is very cramped with bodies and equipment. There's no room to move, no room to breathe, and never any room for error in this film, and that makes it so riveting. The stakes always feel high, the tension unrelenting. Number 2, the battle scenes. Simply, they're great. There is enough action to keep anyone entertained, and then every battle feels like it matters. Everything counts in this film. It's so compact and clever. But it doesn't skimp on the action, and the acting of the crew members when trapped in their own ship during these fights is genuine and immersive. And when we get the shots of the crews aboard the Japanese ships, they're filmed respectfully and with sensitivity. They're not caricatures and stereotypes. They seem like real people, dedicated and duty-bound. And number 3, as much as it pains me to say it, I fear this will compromise my long-held assertions of the Burt Lancaster Paradox. I have to give credit where it is due. Burt Lancaster's performance of Lieutenant James Bledsoe is a real winner with me, and a strength of the film. The character stays always on the honorable side of things, is competent and an inspiring leader, and a character you can root for. And Lancaster's portrayal of him is restrained, dialed way back. Lancaster is usually a very big actor, but his more controlled performance here works within the confines of the ship and its space limitations. He's really good here. Now my cons. I feel that the crew's almost immediate suspicion of Richardson wasn't quite fair. He was an experienced commander who, while not their first choice for the job, still was a worthy leader for them, and one they shouldn't have been so suspicious of right away. He was never cruel, nor seemingly unhinged, but their mistrust of him seems to stem more from a need to drive the plot in that direction to set up the eventual soft mutiny. 2. For a film with so much tension, there's very little of it between Richardson and Bledsoe. The two men are quite gentlemanly with each other, and their mutual respect is always in the forefront, even when they disagree. Some more overt conflict between the two of them might have made for some good scenes. I would love to have seen the two of them really go at it. And 3, Richardson's death. There was really no reason for his character to die. He was effectively redeemed by the final battle, and the crew had found a new captain in Bledsoe. Richardson could have gotten a happy ending here. But in true Moby Dick fashion, the captain of the ship cannot survive his own quest for vengeance.
And is this getting a watch recommendation?
Oh yeah. This is a genuine example of they don't make them like this anymore. So treat yourself right, give it a watch, you won't be disappointed. You're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1. The shots in the submarine. There was just so much stuff crammed into the scenes on the sub. So much equipment and a ton of people in those tiny little rooms. Everything felt so packed and close together. It honestly made me feel super claustrophobic. But somehow it was in a good way, I guess. 2. The underwater shots of the submarine. I was literally holding my breath every time they would just narrowly avoid getting hit by a torpedo. And seriously, what kind of torpedoes were they? They were crazy powerful. But also, when the sub was taking damage, I was so stressed out watching those depth charges slowly fall onto the hull. Those shots were really well done and prolonged the stressfulness of the scenes. 3. Surprisingly, Burt Lancaster. I was kind of hesitant to put this one in, but I felt like I had to. I liked him in this so much more than in Rope of Sand. He was so restrained, and I really liked his character. He was a really great guy. Cons. 1. The boat swaying. I get it, they're in a submarine in the middle of the ocean, but oh my gosh. Just watching the sub cut through the waves and rock back and forth, and the way everything shifted when they were diving or coming up, it made me feel so nauseous. 2. Richardson dying. He got his redemption moment of figuring out there was another ship, and he even gave the order to fire the last torpedoes. He seriously did not have to die. He avenged his ship and crew, but he didn't even get to enjoy it. That's really uncool. 3. The shots of the submarine in open water. There were so many. Like, we get it. They're on a submarine that is traveling across the ocean. Do we need to see a shot of it every 5 minutes? It just got a bit repetitive. But this is definitely a watch.
We don't usually disagree too much when it comes to our taste in films, and I really had a feeling we would both enjoy this one. And I agree with you on Richardson. That guy deserved a happily ever after, back at his desk.
Yeah, I guess being a desk jockey wasn't on brand for Clark Gable.
Yeah, maybe.
So that brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we hope you enjoy it.
And if you did, you know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe, and leave us a comment or send us a message. We'd love to read it on the show.
And keep the film suggestions coming in. We want to do them all.
And as always, the most important thing is, if you dig this podcast, don't feel you need to keep it to yourself.
We're not a secret.
It's okay. You can talk about us anytime you'd like, with anyone. We don't mind.
So tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might enjoy seafaring adventures as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Sam the Sidekick, I'm Derek, and I love old movies. Additional research for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, is done by Nikki Weatherden. Audio clips come from freefx.co.uk. Images are used through the provisions of fair use, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, is by The Crocs.